Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Coaching Uncovered podcast. My name is Chris Berry, and I'm going to be your host for today. Joining us, we have Denise Murtha Bachmann. Denise, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you for asking. How are you?
I'm doing great. Enjoying my Friday morning and looking forward to chatting with you about coaching businesses. So, fill me in before we get into the meat and potatoes. I know we've had a couple conversations before and we could talk about different stuff of it. Fill everyone in that's either listening or watching what you help people with, please.
Yeah, so I am a sales coach, consultant, fractional sales leader, and as well, I also have been dropping in salespeople. So I'll hire and drop in salespeople, whether they're BDRs or account executives as well, into my accounts that I'm working or my clients that I'm working with.
Okay, cool. What made you get into this role, this space?
Yeah, sales. Well, because that's what I spent over 30 years doing. That has been my profession. It is not something I just fell into. It's something I actually sought out as a profession and loved it and realized that at the end of, 30 plus years, I realized as we were in the trenches in this digital transformation that we were adopting all of these AI technologies. All right, so AI includes automation, right? Because everyone confuses that or includes it under the umbrella. But nonetheless, we were adopting all these new technologies into the sales process, but we weren't doing them effectively. And so I realized there was a gap I could fill, which was, yes, let's adopt and adapt to AI. I can teach you, or new technologies, I can teach you how to do that. But that's only about 10% of my business. But the remaining 90% or so is really how do you inject the human back in? Because we've been going through this digital transformation, we've been automating a lot of processes and leveraging these new technologies. We've lost the human interaction within the sales process. So that's really where I spend most of my focus. So hopefully that helps. Did that answer your question?
It did for sure. I mean, all the automations, so valuable, so helpful in regards to getting more done. But sometimes it's easy to get lost and, oh, we got to automate this aspect, got to automate that aspect, and losing the thing that's most important, which is the human aspect of it. So I fully agree. As you've been going through, stepping into this, helping clients and growing your business, what would you say have been some of your favorite parts of owning your business? And what would you say have been some of the biggest challenges that you faced?
So probably my favorite is that I do, the reason why I ventured off on my own was, yes, I could fulfill a gap that I felt like was there. But the other was that in sales in particular, it's not always about what I've done for them in the past, or it's always about what are you doing for me today or tomorrow and beyond. And what I realized was that as I was encroaching 50, I was really stressed out. It was affecting my health and really my relationships with my family. So I think the best part is that I've been able to get back to navigating better health and spending more time with my family, doing the things that we love, which is really my vision, part of it, at least from a personal perspective. So that's been my favorite. I also think, too, I would add another favorite is that I've enjoyed working in these different opportunities. Every opportunity seems to be a little bit more customized, and I can choose and pick what roles I want to take on, what clients I want to work with, and how I want to work with each of them. So I think that's been my favorite as well. So those were the two. My challenges have been just shifting. I've done some different transformations throughout the almost 3 years in business. I started out in B2C and then I went back to B2B. I wanted to launch a program, but instead started to focus more on, just customized work and in the B2B space, really focused on what they needed versus putting a total plan together, meaning a curriculum, which is what I originally wanted to do when I ventured off into the B2B space. So I'd say my challenge has been my transformation, which has also turned out to be the positive. I think that what I take away from that is I've been able to evolve to fit the needs of what the demand is out there. So hopefully I answered your question.
Yeah. The favorite parts, as you mentioned, the freedom and also the working with different clients, learning all of it, getting those different experiences, obviously seeing the results. And the challenges is the parts of business where it's not always crystal clear of, okay, then you need to do this, and then you need to do this. Like, wait, hold on, well, I got to pivot here, and
Yep.
kind of just the navigating that aspect of it. So it makes sense.
Yep.
One of the biggest things, and I do obviously want to touch a bit more about sales, given the fact that this is your knowledge, this is your expertise. But before we can talk about selling people, we first have to talk about generating the leads. And this is where a lot of coaches fall short. I'd say probably number one is they don't get enough leads or people to speak to. And then number two, if they do, they don't have the communication skills to convert them into paying clients. So I'll come back to that second part here in a second. But how have you, inside of your business of doing this for the past 3 years, actually generated leads for all that you're doing?
Yeah. So I took at the time a non-traditional path. Although I would say that that's becoming more traditional now. But when I started and ventured out on my own, I took the non-traditional path, which was I didn't really want to focus on generating leads through traditional outbound methods because I myself, even not that I don't know how to do it or that I'm fearful of it, I don't like being cold called. Like I don't like picking up the phone to a cold caller. I don't answer my emails or my texts if I don't know them. I don't even really read them probably. So I wanted to focus on how do I generate more inbound leads. So I really spent a lot of time in having referral conversations. So if you, for lack of a better way to describe, maybe building out referral campaigns and getting my visibility and credibility out there. And I leveraged LinkedIn to do that. Now, I'm not opposed at all. In fact, I teach my clients how to do cold calling because that's just in a B2B space. You do have to be able to do that, especially if you've got stakeholders and investors and, tons of, or not even tons, but even just employees. If you're a solopreneur, it becomes a bit different. As fellow coaches out there, we have a choice in how we want to prospect. And for me, I chose purely inbound. Doesn't mean I don't teach how to do outbound. Doesn't mean that I say outbounding is a no completely. But for me, as a solopreneur, my focus has been on the inbound lead generation, which is just getting out there from a visibility and credibility perspective.
And you talked about leveraging LinkedIn as a medium to build that visibility, credibility. What specifically would you do on LinkedIn? Is it you making videos? Is it making value posts? Is it just connecting with people? What are the things that you found to be most effective?
Yeah, so originally I started out really more with a commenting strategy. So it was really just getting out there and just having conversation. And then that launched into generating real content. And my content has been a myriad of different types of content, anything from the crazy viral posts that you see that I procure one, download one from somewhere else and then put it in there and make my post or the text of the post actually really map to that video, to personalized videos. I've done text only. I'm not as great at carousels or slideshows, only because they take me a lot of time to do. But any type of content. So I went from just commenting to generating content, which got me a LinkedIn Top Voice Blue badge, which like only 300 people in a year even get. So I did enough of that. And then I really so that was visibility and credibility. And then I spend a lot of time in the DMs. So the DMs, I have a DM strategy and that's a whole lengthy strategy that we can dive into should you want to do that. But there is a strategy around my DMs as well. So it is three-pronged: commenting, content, so generating my own content, and in the DMs.
Yeah. And on the early stages, it was primarily commenting that I assume went into DMs from there, because you mentioned that you started integrating content after, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
But
So DMs after, yes.
yeah, knowing what you know now, and I'm going to ask somewhat of a similar question at the very end, but knowing what you know now, would you do that same sort of approach of commenting straight into DMs, or would you probably adjust things differently, knowing and having this experience?
Yeah, no, I would still do the same because what I believe in myself, because I like to be the recipient of that, I believe in warm opportunities, warm outbound, warm prospecting, right? And the only way to do that is to take the conversations that you're having in your content, whether it's your comments or in your own content, and transition that over into the DMs, right? So I would still continue to do that. I wouldn't change that. What I would probably do though differently in the DMs is I wish I'd have gotten better at DMing sooner rather than later. Cause at first it's kind of awkward, and now I've got, and I was also, imposter syndrome, and just the normal, and you went from traditional sales where, it was not uncommon for you to be a little bit more formal, to really just being informal and having fun in the DMs, because that's what builds the relationships and prompts them to want to actually engage with you and have further conversation.
Yeah. And it's funny that you said the awkward piece, because that's exactly what I was thinking in my head. Because that's where a lot of coaches that I speak to that do some sort of essentially an outreach to a certain degree of what it is. You're providing value, you're building the relationship first. So it's not as much like a cold, you have a little bit of a relationship with them,
A little bit
but
of a
they
warm, I
just,
call it a warm.
yep, they feel awkward. Like they don't know what to say. And they're like, how do I transition and like not feel weird and everything? So what do you recommend? We don't necessarily, if you'd like to, I'm more than happy to dive into the DM strategy, but how do you make it to where it's not that awkward, just feeling like you're asking for, hey, let's get on a sales call, right? Because that's what a lot of people just end up doing. Hey, I can help you. Let's get on a sales call, rather than building that relationship. So what's that process you typically walk through?
Yeah, so I never make it about me in the beginning. It's always about them, and it's uber personalized. So if I'm taking it over to the DMs from a comment, or if I'm taking it there from my own content, I usually find something, if it's a comment, hey, I appreciated your comment, and here's what I liked about it. Or, I always make it, and tell me, what your thought process was around it, or why did you, anything you would add. I find ways to connect with them, and I always make it about them. So it does take me more than the average to get to a point where I have a sales conversation. It usually takes me 2 or 3 DMs at a minimum to start to have a sales conversation, because again, I want to make it about them. Look, the reality is, whether you're on LinkedIn or Twitter, or it doesn't matter well, I guess that's not Twitter anymore, it's X, but no matter the platform, right? We're all engaging in some form or another to sell something, whether that's our own products and services, or it's a company's products and services, or even our brand, right? Maybe we're just trying to build our brand. It doesn't really matter. We're trying to sell something, but no one wants to know. They don't want to feel that you're trying to sell them something right away. So you make it about them, ask them questions, and you try to find some commonality, whether it was in the comment, whether it was something that you've uncovered in their profile. Like, go check who they are, what they do. Don't allow the automated solution to pull that out, because most of the times, I mean, the ones I get, it's like so generic. Like, yes, the automated solution saw that I own Cellivators, or that I work at Cellivators, right? But they don't take the time to look at what else I'm doing, or what is my role at Cellivators? When did I start it? How many years ago, right? No one goes in and does enough of that homework. And it only takes you a few minutes more to do that. It takes you maybe 2 minutes to peruse their profile, to come up with something that you can extract that will give some commonality or an opportunity for you to engage over.
Yeah, it's very true. And as we said in the very beginning, it's this desire to, oh, I got to do more, because if I do more, that's going to lead to the sale, lead to this. But what they don't realize, that by shortchanging themselves those little a couple minutes, as you were describing, it slows everything down by a lot. So, okay.
I
So
would say slow down to speed up.
correct. Exactly. So we talked about kind of the whole flow and process of getting started, favorite parts, challenges. We talked about the marketing strategy that you employed, especially in the very beginning, of building that inbound, of commenting, then doing posts, then leading into the DMs. We talked about making it about them, because let's be real. 2 things. Number one, people buy things to solve a problem. And if we don't understand them and their problem, it's very difficult to sell them. That's part one. Part two, people love buying, but can't stand being sold. And so taking it on that point of like, okay, look, it's all about you. It's not about me. So like, how can I just guide you to maybe do what you're wanting to? So, so we've talked about all these different things. And I know this is such a massive blanket statement, but is there one thing with your clients that is a common misstep, a common fault that a lot of them have when it comes to sales, that you're like, hey, if I were to give you one piece of advice as a blanket statement to people, this is what you need to do with sales. Is there any one that really comes to mind that you've
Yeah,
had as
no one,
advice?
yeah, no one asks enough questions. I think
Mm,
that we don't. So two things that I see. They don't ask enough questions either. One, because they don't feel comfortable, like they feel like they have to make better use of their time, and asking questions seems like too cumbersome to and awkward for the one that you're for your prospect or your buyer, right? Or they just don't take the time to actually listen and ask the second and third and fourth line questions. I mean, look, the reality is usually when we're selling something, if even if a buyer comes to you, they're solving to a systemic problem. Like they know that they're solving a problem, but they don't really know what the root of it is until you take them down that path. When you do that, and you try to solve to the root problem, you build a stronger relationship, your sales are larger, and you build a partnership for a lifetime when you do that.
yeah. Why do you think people don't ask more questions?
I think it's a couple of different reasons. One is the newer generation, we're immediate needs. So it's like we just get, we have a thought in our head, we get it out, and then we move on to the next thought, right? The other is I think that we don't know how to connect anymore in a way. I mean, like this is my favorite example. Chris, let's do a quick little role play. If I were to ask you, Chris, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing good, thanks. Now, why are you only good?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
The thing is no one says, well, no one, you go on right to the next topic, but no one really tries to uncover. Now, that's a really simplistic example, but you
Mm,
and I, if we were to continue that role play, we could go on for 5 minutes just talking about what good means to you. Why was it only good? What could have been, what could have made it great, right?
mm-hmm.
And how often do you just have good versus great? And sometimes when you have those conversations, like what we could have found out, Chris, was that you just said good because that's your blanket statement, but in actuality, you had a phenomenal day thus far, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And then all of a sudden that changes the dynamic of the conversation because now you're a little bit more positive and it takes you into realms of conversation that you would never have. And oh, by the way, when you ask those types of questions, when you dig in deep, actually they usually feel like you care enough about them. Even if you don't know them super well, they're like, wow, she's really interested in me. She really wants to know why I only said good, right?
Mm-hmm.
Take that same concept outside of the, hey, how are you, to the, here's the problem I'm trying to solve. Well, why? Well, what happens if you don't solve it? What are the implications right now if you do solve it? What's the positive results from that, right? If you continue down this path and never do anything, what is that going to look like?
Yeah.
Who has a stake in this, right? I mean, it's uncovering all of those things that people are afraid to ask. So it all goes down to, I don't think people ask enough questions, and they do it out of fear for the most part, or they just are on this path where they're going 90 to nothing and they just don't take the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think it's also a bit of autopilot too, like that initial question that you mentioned of, hey, how are you? It's just that's just a normal thing. And I even have friends that are from not from the US, and they're like, why do you guys act like that's not a common thing that we do? It's just like, because it's just like almost numb, regardless of the thing of people like, yeah, I'm okay. Okay, nice. And then they dive right in versus like you can very clearly tell something's up with that person, you know? And it's like taking that extra moment to care and do all that stuff. So I think you touched upon this, but a massive part of it, as you mentioned, not just seeking to hear what the person says, but to truly understand them with a genuine curiosity. If I'm going to sell you something, I want to understand about you and the situation. Where are you now? Where do you want to be? Why haven't you gotten there? And can I even help you do that? I think it's also a mix of that genuine curiosity, as you're essentially describing before too. So,
Yeah, my methodology is be curious,
mm,
actively listen, and be audible ready. And audible ready just means to be able to shift the conversation. So, I always teach, don't have 20 questions when you go into a discovery call. Instead, decide what your intent is for that call. like 1 in 10 is I'll qualify in or out. Well, if you're going to qualify in or out, what's at least 1 to 2 questions that you have to have answered? Write those down and then allow the rest of it to flow. I think that's when we do that, we actively listen, it enables us to be audible, ready to ask those, questions 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, right? And what would have been a 20 question conversation is probably still 20 questions, but in a way that is conversational rather than a Q&A session.
Correct. Exactly. One thing I'm really curious about, because obviously you've talked about, you've been in sales so long, you have a ton of experience, you've helped a lot of people. Most coaches, as we've discussed, don't have the tool on their tool belt, which is sales. And so if you were, let's say, back to when you're just getting started or learning sales, where would you go to improve your sales skills? Is it on YouTube videos? Is it certain books? Is it hiring coaches? What are some of the tools that if you were kind of recommending to your older version of you?
Yeah, look, I mean, my sales experience, I've had a ton of different trainings as it relates to methodology, right? So Sandler, Impacts, Challenger Sale. I think all of those are worth taking. So finding, a methodology that you want to, take a class for. But I'd say really ultimately these days, it's really about coaching, finding a coach that really can spend some quality time with you and help you, because most of your coaches who are specifically our sales coaches are going to have had all of that training and they've created their own methodology based on their experience, all the trainings that they've had in the past, and they're going to bring them and bring them into one opportunity to engage with you, right? They're taking all of their knowledge and imparting their knowledge on you, and they've been out there doing it for a while. A lot of the things that you see, like maybe Sandler, not specifically, but if I go to the Vito training or Impacts, selling to Vito and Impacts, those are really outdated. And a lot of the methodologies that you see out there today that you could take advantage of have not adapted to the modern way of selling. Doesn't mean they're obsolete, doesn't mean you can't learn anything from them, but they've not fully pivoted to the way that we sell today. They still teach how to do, cold calling and how to do that effectively. And really the reality is that's not where we're seeing the new sales method any longer. It's not focused around cold calling. Doesn't mean it's dead. I'm not going to say that. Although I would, being Denise Murtha Bachmann as the owner and founder of Cellivators, I would say cold calling is dead to me. And I don't think that we're going to see cold calling right now. The effectiveness is 1% or below. If you're lucky and really good at it, you might get anywhere from a 2 to 6% success rate. But why waste all your time, the remainder of that 94 to 98% of your time? Why would you spend that doing something that isn't going to really provide any return on, or not much return on of value, right? Why wouldn't you spend your time doing something more effective? So I go back to hiring a sales coach. That was a long-winded answer to, I think the most effective way is to hire a sales coach, because while there are other methodologies that you can study and learn, and I think you should dive into those. There are tons of great books out there. There are great coaches that I would follow, sales evangelists. It is really having that one-on-one that can take all the experience that they've had, both success and study, and bring that all into one opportunity to engage with someone who can really share what's worked and what hasn't worked.
For sure. Well, as you just mentioned, essentially the summation of all their knowledge, and you're fast tracking your way to success, So one last question I do have, and I know I've asked a couple of different variations of this question. If you were to have the old version of you sitting right here, it's day one, you just started your business, knowing what you know now, what one piece of advice would you give to the old version of Denise?
I would say that I would recommend, I would suggest that you give yourself grace. When you are starting your own business, especially as a coach, you're going to go through these different transformations. You're going to probably shift your business a bit. You're going to shift the way you do things. So I would, instead of beating myself up over some of those changes and wishing I would have done it sooner, or, wishing I'd have tried something now versus, waiting longer to do that. Wish I wouldn't have spent that much money on something that I could have focused the funds somewhere else on. I think it's really just about giving myself grace. We are all learning every day. I mean, I always say, if you're not learning, you're not growing. And if you're not growing, you're dying. Right. And so I do believe that we should all take all of our experiences in every moment and every day as something that continues us through our journey, and not to be so hard on yourself. So I would have said, Denise, give yourself more grace.
Mm, so true. Well, Denise, I'm sure I thoroughly enjoy having the conversation. I was going to tell you this after, and I'll probably tell you more after when we hop off. But it's just like the flow. It's like boom, 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 boom. I love having conversations like this. So it was great having you on.
Thank you.
For anybody who is interested in connecting with you, they really resonate with your message. Maybe they need some help in sales. Maybe they're looking for what you offer. What's the best way for them to connect with you?
So they can always find me on LinkedIn. I have not been as active, but I'm still there. I check it every day. So if you want to engage with me on LinkedIn. That is really the easiest way to find me.
Okay, cool. Well, once again, it was great having you on. Thank you very much, and we'll talk more soon. If you guys like this video, make sure to go ahead and like and subscribe. And if you'd also like to watch another episode to see how you can continue to grow your coaching business, go ahead and click right here.